Greetings and welcome to Sports 101, the show that discusses sport beyond the X's and O's. Here at Sports 101, we look at the game from a people, places, and cultural perspective through the lens of history in the past, present, as well as in the making. I am your host, Jamar Harp. Be sure you follow me on social media on Twitter at Coach_Harp412 and Facebook under Jamar Harp. Please make sure you get social with Sports 101 and the litany of other shows on SportsZone Chicago by following SportsZone Chicago on social media. SportsZone Chicago is the world's only Black-owned sports talk radio app. SportsZone Chicago can be found on Twitter at SportsZoneCHI, Facebook at SportsZone Chicago, and Instagram at SportsZone Chicago. Remember, SportsZone Chicago is a sports talk app. You can watch and listen to my show, many others. Keep up breaking sports news. If you miss anything, don't worry about it. All the shows are streamed live on Facebook and YouTube. If you miss something, just go to YouTube and search Sports Zone Chicago, add a channel. You'll watch all the breaking shows. Besides YouTube, we need everyone to download the Sports Zone Chicago app. The Sports Zone Chicago app can be found in the iTunes, Google Play, and Amazon stores. Now, to start this week's episode off, I want to start with a little video. Then we'll go into the show.
All right, we going. What a money reside. What a money reside. What a money reside. What a money reside. Okay, let me tell y'all something. I'm doing something real big this month. Any deal that y'all got and they beating us, I'm gonna be about $400. Just give me your pen and the paper, because I'm asked what the what? What a money reside. What a money reside. What a money reside. What a money reside. Okay, I told y'all before. Y'all know what I do. I give all these good deals and everything else. Y'all better ask about me, because I do all that all the time. And that's on who? Mary Had a Little Lamb. Okay. 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 Okay.
All right, so that video is of a young man who went famous on social media for selling cars, I believe somewhere in the South, I think Alabama. And that represents the title of tonight's episode, is Where the Money Resides, College Head Football Coaching Salaries, and How Universities Are Afforded. We also want to take a quick look into some of the recruiting trends that are based off of these new coaching hires. So in recent days, especially this past week, college football coaches have been handed some of the most lucrative salaries in the history of the sport. This first picture right here is of Lincoln Riley. Lincoln Riley was hired by the University of Southern California from the University of Oklahoma with a contract speculated to be worth over $110 million. Again, that's a contract over $110 million. The incentives included in his contract is USC is buying both of his homes in Norman for $500,000 over the asking price. They've added up to $1 million bonus. They're buying a $6 million home in Los Angeles for the head coach, and he gets unlimited use of the private jet 24/7 for him and his family. And those are some pretty great perks for a college football coach. Would you not agree? According to Sports Illustrated, Riley's Oklahoma salary amounted to $45 million over 6 years. So that's still pretty good, but not what he's getting at USC. He had been previously signed to a 5-year, $32 million deal in 2019 before inking a new 6-year deal in July of 2020 that included a 2-year extension that was supposed to keep him in Norman up to 2025. USC is also handling his $4.5 million buyout. So they've invested almost $20 million in him outside of salary. So that goes to show you the billions that these institutions have created off of the backs of the student athletes. And we'll also dwell into that a little bit later. USC is still on the hook for their former head coach, Clay Helton's buyout of more than $10 million, which they had to execute to bring in Lincoln Riley after they fired him after the 4th game this season, after a 42-28 loss to Stanford. Our next new big-time hire is Brian Kelly. Brian Kelly is a former Notre Dame head coach who's recently signed a contract with LSU worth $95 million over 10 years, laden with incentives and critical notes on performance and graduation rate. Most likely the APR. The base salary for each season is as follows: In 2022, he'll have 9 million. In 23, 9.2. He will increase to 9.4 in 2025. In 2027, he will go to 9.6, and it is projected that he will finally reach the in 2031 $10 million a year. This contract is extremely unique for a number of reasons, starting with the incentives in Brian Kelly's contract. So one incentive particular is for every full season Kelly lasts or is retained at LSU, he gets an extra $500,000 that July, like a stay-on bonus. He also receives an extra $500,000 incentive every year to become bowl eligible. And remember, to become bowl eligible, you only have to win 6 games. LSU hasn't had a losing season since 1999, has been bowl eligible every year since then. He gets an extra $1 million in incentives every year if he gets a 6-6 record or better. If you looked at this adjusted salary of incentives, which most likely he will make because the benchmarks are so low, 6-6, that would make him the highest paid coach in collegiate football as of today. There are varying levels of incentives. For example, if LSU wins the SEC or a national championship, his maximum incentives will go up to $1.3 million that particular year for winning the SEC or national championship. If he wins a national championship while at LSU at any time, he gets an additional $500,000 to each contract year following after the championship. So let's say LSU won the national championship in 2023. So every year after that, whatever his salary is, it'll be plus 500,000 plus the other incentives, but mainly plus 500,000 every year. So he'll just get a raise of 500,000 for winning the national championship. Also, if LSU wins a championship under Kelly, national championship, and then fires him, he gets 100% of his remaining salary. The school will owe him 90% of his remaining salary if they fire him without cause and no championship wins. So if they fire him for not doing anything wrong and just not winning a championship, he gets 90% of his salary. If he wins a national championship and there's some type of controversial scandal or he's fired for cause, he still gets 100% of his salary. In addition to his incentives, they allow Brian Kelly, he doesn't get a limited access like the USC head coach. However, he does get 50 hours of private travel on one of LSU's many planes. He gets an interest-free loan of $1.2 million and 2 free cars. So if you want to look at what $1.2 million or around that looks like in Baton Rouge, here's some pictures here of some homes in the Baton Rouge area that what you can get for 1.2 or higher. And I remember in other parts of the country, these homes would be probably triple in price. So here's another one right here. And last, we have a Mediterranean-style villa, with a Greco-Roman type pool in the front of the house. So again, this is what you're getting for under $2 million in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and everywhere else in the country. This might start at $10 million. This next picture right here is of an SEC veteran who has spent time with Nick Saban, as well as with Kirby Smart at LSU. He was the defensive coordinator in that epic national championship game Tua's first year, where for some reason they played cover 2, and it was just a rope thrown to get Devontae Smith the ball, and that comeback win over Georgia in that national championship. This is Mel Tucker. Mel Tucker left Georgia and went to the University of Colorado, and then was lured for greener pastures at Michigan State, mainly due to his ties in Ohio, being a native of the Cuyahoga County and Cleveland area. He didn't win a conference title yet at Michigan State, And yet, due to the speculations of him being considered for other jobs and the boost that he gave Michigan State football, remember, Michigan State is ultimately known as a basketball school in many circles in the sports world, have Michigan State football relevant, at the same time the University of Michigan is big. And also they beat the University of Michigan this year. So for those factors, he got a contract extension worth up to 95 million for 10 years. Tucker's contract is also set that he will receive all money in full if he's fired at any time without cause. So if he gets fired without cause, meaning he didn't do anything wrong, he's just not winning, they have to give him $95 million, which is pretty good because, again, these numbers sound normal, but they're really astronomical to most people, as most people are not going to make $10 million a year for coaching football. So the big question is, how are these salaries possible? This is all possible, again, because of the cap on the value of labor of collegiate football. So what do I mean by a cap on labor? In layman's terms, that means players create the wealth in collegiate sports, but only compensated in the form of scholarships. So they're not paid like employees. Recently, with name, image, and likeness deals, more commonly known as NILs, players are earning more. You have to work to secure these deals themselves, while the money made by their labor still goes to the institution. So even if a player makes $1 million off of NIL, what some players are doing at high-level institutions, that institution is bringing in uh, billions of dollars due to being playing, especially at the high-level ones, big bowl games every year, um, increased enrollments, and television contracts. So that 1 million that the student athlete makes does not come from the sweat equity that he gives to that institution, and the institution is not giving them a piece of what they made. They're just allowing them uh, time to work and taking up less time than they already have as a student athlete. Again, this is one of the most egregious forms of systematic wage theft in American society today. Any union member would say that. And this amateur model of collegiate sports, it yields almost 19 billion annually in revenue to the NCAA. So that's 19 billion every year to the NCAA, which is obviously they split that to all its divisions 1, 2, and 3. But the lion's share of that goes to Division One or BCS athletics. These coaches are paid millions of dollars, as well as athletic department officials, off the sweat equity of these student athletes. And it's just nothing to the athletes is being done in regards to industry standards in regards to work. If you look at the General Counsel of Labor Relations, we talked about them in a prior episode when we talked about unionization before the name, image, and likeness deal was passed, and particularly Northwestern University and its football team, who filed a motion against the university and formed the labor union. However, Northwestern is a private institution, so this will not be able to be replicated at public institutions just due to the laws. So the General Counsel of Labor Relations, Jennifer Abruzzo, she issued a memo in September stating that college players or employees under federal labor laws should be entitled to labor law protections, including the ability to negotiate fair wages and workplace rights. So when you think of fair wages, what that means is based off of how much they make or earn, that should be paid a wage off of that. So remember, the NCAA brings in $19 billion every year. So in 2 years, they make $38 billion. Remember, it takes 4 years to graduate. So you got, what is that, 86 billion dollars that a student athlete can create, if not more, in his time at that institution. In recent press releases, which most people describe as union busting, the organization representing the athletic directors at Division I football programs, they stated that 85% of athletic directors surveyed, they were concerned about college athletes being classified as employees because that's going to take away from some of their control as well as the ability to keep these $19 million away from trickling down to the people that created. Whether via legislative, administrative, or judicial means, corresponding benefits and protections such as the right to organize, strike, the right to be paid for overtime. Remember the 20-hour rule, which sometimes and pretty much all the time is tongue in cheek per se. Minimum wage, health and safety protections, and so much more will be provided to these student athletes of that $19 billion they bring in if they were considered employees. And that would take some power away from the NCAA, which classifies them only as student athletes. The reason that's happening is because these athletic directors benefit from the status quo, meaning they can use their status to influence these students, athletes, as well as the coaches sometimes. Um, if you look at athletic director salaries, and particularly on the Division I level, there's 4 athletic directors that earn more than $2 million annually. 25 earn more than $1 million, and 51 earn 700,000 or more. So that's a lot of people being paid just to direct the so-called athletics in which the student athletes are bringing in all the income. So that's pretty much equivalent to sharecropping. I let you stay on my land, which is a charge. However, the service that you provide me provides money and resources not only for my country, but for Europe and the world as well. And I'm referencing King Cotton. Um, These numbers do not include athletic directors at private institutions whose salaries are not disclosed. So actually, these numbers are quite higher. Remember, most players in the common era are well aware how they're being used. Henceforth, you're seeing these trends now, like Shador Sanders and his horticultural hashtags. I'm trying to start a Sankofa for a renaissance of the top African American athletes matriculating from historically black colleges and universities, and particularly the SWAC and the MEAC, and the other calls for justice that athletes are doing. If you look at the black players at the University of Texas who are sitting out the song "The Eyes of Texas" due to its racial connotations, and so many other examples of student athletes being woke, partly due to the professional athlete sharing those same sentiments and the student athlete copying. Um, One former Division I gymnast was interviewed by the LA Times, and she put it, she felt surprised that 15% of athletic directors put the athletes' empowerment and health above their own self-interest. She also pointed out, she also pointed out that how can athletes be denied the right that any self-respecting NCAA employee would insist upon it was him or herself, meaning if I'm bringing in $19 billion and you only pay me the cost of a scholarship for 4 years, which is less than 100,000, I'm being underpaid. There was an anthropology professor who even agreed to take, or what she said was, what anthropology professor, would ever take a job that didn't offer workers' compensation or health benefits? Just free books. Yes, and then so many athletes, they did not get this protection or benefits despite being full-time workers. Remember, full-time employment is defined in the United States and by the IRS as 30 or more hours worked in each week. Based on that definition by the IRS, the NCAA's own data, and the NCAA's own data, 19 different sports qualify as full-time workload based, and that's off their weekly hours of participation. Notably, Division I football players work an average of 40 hours per week, while Division I baseball players work even more at an average of 42 hours per week. The money thrown or at departing coaches is even more preposterous because these schools have to pay 10 to 15, sometimes $20 million to buy the previous coach out, then spend another 100 to bring the new coach in, and then another maybe 30 more for his staff. So you got to look at all this money, and that's coming off the sweat equity of student athletes. Between January 1st of 2010 and January 31st of 2021, public schools and the top football conferences in men's and women's basketball as well as football netted $533 million not to work. So that's all the people that got paid to leave were paid not to work, and that's how much that amount equates. That amount equates to. That number has only risen in the recent months, with the fired football coaches getting huge buyouts, including 16 or 17 million, 10 million, and 12 million at LSU, the University of Washington, and the University of Florida, respectively. So those were all the buyouts for those schools. Dante Stewart, who was a former football player at Clemson, uh, he stated that the position of athletic directors on collegiate athlete employment rights cannot be divorced from the racial dynamics of collegiate athletes as well. He noted by saying that 83% of athletic directors in Division One or of European ancestry, while the majority of athletes, and particularly in the revenue sports, which are football and men's and women's basketball, along with track, are predominantly of African descent. And he said, in fact, the black athletes in specifically the Power Five conferences or BCS are estimated to be losing out to 1.2 billion to 1.4 or 1.5 billion a year if paid due to the amount of hours worked. So based off the money they earn and the amount of hours they put in, 40 to 42 hours a week. The track hours are around the same, sometimes longer if you treat treatment, training, and stretching. These athletes will all be paid, uh, around $1 billion because they're bringing in close to 20 billion. Um, it was stated that this is a demonstration that a college sport is a site of white male power. This is why he believes in unionization. That's the only way for athletes, in particular the minority athlete, to defend their interests. This again becomes very urgent because you have to look at the context of occupational health as well as safety. Um, we know that in the NFL, that's the one sport where their contracts are not guaranteed due to the high risk of injury and sport-ending injury. These injuries, most athletes, they don't receive health coverage for anything non-sport related, and none receive long-term health coverage for health problems stemming from their time in college sports. So similar to the NFL, as a collegiate athlete that played for 4 years, there's no place I can go to for PTSD, for the multiple surgeries that I had, arthritis, ailments. There's no like VA for athletes that you can go to. And this is something that they would be advocating because these or injuries often occurred from the times of 19 to 23 that may affect you in your later years of life. Again, the scholarships are also renewed yearly now. There's no 4-year scholarships, which means issues with mental health and other injuries are often ignored or hidden for years due to a fear of losing the scholarship. So a lot of student athletes incur internal as well as external and physical damage to their bodies, all in competition to keep these scholarships, which are renewed yearly. Basically, even though the NCAA classifies the athletes as students first, they operate in a professional manner, said Brittany Collins, who was a former tennis player at UMass. She said there can be a fair system that works for athletes, schools, and athletic departments. It just requires a lot of effort, understanding, and the right people behind it. She said there's no reason to believe that the people or the athletic directors and the football coaches currently living um, large on a compensated labor of the college athletes that they're in charge with serving. Like that doesn't make sense. and she doesn't understand why people don't realize that. Again, you have to realize that those athletes are not likely to tolerate having their interests denied and their voices silenced indefinitely, especially now with so many social movements going on dealing with race, culture, religion, and more recently, sexual identity. Time is running out in regards to this NCAA stranglehold as social media and other platforms are used to express student athletes' desires to be treated as wage earning employees, similar to their coaches and athletic directors who make billions of dollars off their backs and give them a scholarship and the opportunity now with the NIL to make money by finding an additional job for sponsorship. So I want to take a quick break. Again, I'm Jamar Harp, and this is Sports 101. And we come back, we're going to examine some recruiting associated with these head coaching changes.
Please stop and listen because this important message may directly apply to you or someone dear to you. Several thousand African American former full-time CPS teachers were unfairly terminated starting in the mid-90s and continuing to the 2000s. If you are one of those many former CPS teachers who was unjustly terminated, or if you are the immediate relative of a now deceased unjustly terminated former CPS teacher, you may qualify to participate in a lawsuit at no upfront cost to you. Please call 773-580-7183 immediately for more information. That's 773-580-7183. Do not delay. Act today, because time is of the essence. That's 773-580-7183. 773-580-7183.
Welcome back. I'm your host, Jamar Harp, and this is Sports 101, a show that discusses sport beyond the X's and O's. Again, we look at the game here at Sports 101 from a people, places, and cultural perspective, and also through the lens of history in the past, present, as well as in the making. Please make sure you get social with Sports 101 and the litany of other shows on SportsZone Chicago by following SportsZone Chicago on social media. You can follow SportsZone Chicago on Twitter at SportsZoneCHI, Facebook at SportsZone Chicago, and Instagram at SportsZone Chicago. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, search SportsZone Chicago, but more importantly, download the SportsZone Chicago app. The SportsZone Chicago app can be found on the iTunes, Google Play, and Amazon stores. Now, before the break, we talked about these mega hirings as well as these huge buyouts that collegiate football coaches are getting. Now I'd like to dwell into the ramifications in recruiting that are caused by these high-profile hirings. Notable head coaching changes have sparked changes among commitments recently, most notably at the University of Oklahoma. You see a lot of people decommitting and going with Lincoln Riley. More importantly, due to location, a lot of the athletes that were committed to Oklahoma were from the state of California. So Lincoln Riley, being in Southern California at a school that doesn't mind spending, and is in these kids' backyard, so they get to play the offense that they wanted and don't have to go to the quote unquote country, as they say, or across the United States to Oklahoma. There's a lot of people flipping and expect more to come. The news of Lincoln Riley leaving for USC led to several ESPN top 300 decommitments to the Sooners class. As a result, they dropped from inside the top 5. They were the number 3 class, I believe. Now they're just outside the top 10, around 12. The coaching changes will continue to affect the class rankings over the coming weeks as more people are hired and start to assemble their staffs, and student athletes decide where they're going to go after reopening their commitments due to the recent wave of coaching hirings. Alabama and Georgia remain in the top 2 spots respectively, but Texas A&M has pushed its way into the mix as well. The Aggies, shortly after landing the number 1 overall prospect, D-tackle Walter Nolan, they got a commitment from him. They also added 5-star number 2 wide receiver Evan Stewart, who was a big threat with outstanding speed. So I want to show you some videos on these guys real quick, get in the recruiting mode right here. And the first one we're going to do, this will be Mr. Walter Nolan right here. So please watch him, and then we'll get into big play Evan Stewart's video. Get off, the explosion, following the ball, all the skills and attributes that make you pursuit. Anticipation of the snap. Way to play his gap. All right, so you can see right there what makes him a top lineman. And again, Texas A&M, if you don't recall, will be playing in the SEC. So he's going to get to compete in the SEC along with Texas. That's why it was big for Texas to go to as well, too. The 2 biggest schools in Texas to be in the SEC, so they can be on the same footing as in regards to recruiting and brand equity, as the SEC is the top brand going in Power 5 football. Next, I'd like to show you Evan Stewart. This is a big-time receiver, and He should change the game wherever he goes.
Soda on and see what it do. Yeah. All line. 100 of them just sold it all.
This is a playoff game, Cowboys facility.
Tell Migga to bring me my pink phone, you heard me?
100 of them just ordered up. Bitch, I'm a big gangster. I turn around with that foreign love. Cocaine a slanger. 100 of them just ordered up. Surrounded by the angels. Diamonds on when I'm talking love. She won't be my lady, but I'm ready to fall in love. Say I only get excited when the pack touchdown. Pray that we don't get indicted in the trap uptown. Bitch, I'm a big gangster. I turn around with that foreign love. Cocaine a slanger. 100 of them just ordered up.
Hold up, give me that money, little nigga. You knowin' that I'ma do right with it. Private charter, they snorting that tartar. I got them surrounded by white women. I got them looking like Paris Hilton. Each one of my teeth got a carrot in it. Hey, I think my plug racist. All he seen is white. They going dumb in the slum where I'm from. Got a drum on a gun like a pair of teeth. They say that I'm making a major mistake for delivering weight, but I barely listen. I got a play that I'm about to go make for like 200K and I'm out of minutes. I can remember the day when this shit was a shame and I didn't even have a penny. Brand new apartment and we couldn't afford no new furniture. Put us a mattress in. When broken them all, I was trying to keep up with the images. Still had to stack and get it. My daughter turned 1 on a Sunday. Next morning on Monday, I had to go back to prison. My woman was pregnant with Kaza. I put it in throttle and got a new pad to live in. My sister was crying. She wanted a new body. I went out and got her some ass to live. Grinding independently, showing no sympathy. Don't let the industry gas a nigga. When bought me some diamonds, I did it for Mizey, but I never really been flashy with it. Kicking myself in the ass, I went tatted the face of a snake on the back, my kidney. Shit, I give any man a chance, you heard me? But once you show me a flaw, that fallback game in full effect. Look, you can leave your gun in the car, dick.
And this is one of the top receivers in the nation.
Bitch, I'm a big gangster. I turn around with that foreign love. Cocaine a slanger. 100 of them just ordered up. Surrounded by the angels. Diamonds on when I'm talking love. She won't be my little baby, but I'm ready to fall in love. She say I only get excited when the pack touchdown. Pray that we don't get indicted in the trap uptown. Bitch, I'm a big gangster. I turn around with that foreign love. Cocaine a slanger. 100 of them just ordered up. These niggas showing me anger. They taking it out on me. Hit the booth after I hang up with Maceo Haziz. I really fuck with dude for real. Disruptive behavior, eluded meals. Truly been given a taste. Considered this taste for normal foolish shit. OC on the road when the coca was slow, but I still was on go. I was moving pills. Money discussion ain't asking a nigga.
Look at his ability to burst and pull away. All right, so Texas A&M that's supposedly their 13th ESPN Top 300 commit, and they have jumped up to the number 3 spot in the 2022 recruiting class, become a factor in the battle for the top class in the nation, only behind Alabama and Georgia. College football's coaching carousel always creates chaos on a recruiting trail, given especially the timing and impact on the coaches' hires to recruits. This year, all this stuff happened right before the early signing period. So there was a mad dash to get these coaches in, talk to current recruits, keep them stable, as well as try to get others to flip that may have committed to you at your previous institution. This year has been no different, with Lincoln Riley leaving Oklahoma for USC, Florida firing Dan Mullen and hiring Bill Napier, and LSU announcing in October that Ed Odron will no longer return after this season, and recently hiring Brian Kelly. These departures have left many holes at the schools that they have left, as well as the schools that they were recently hired at. And in USC's case, has created instant excitement from prospects. Riley's hiring is likely the best outcome to explain this, as he went to a top blue blood program in all of football with a rich history of Heisman Trophy winners and a standard of excellence. The Trojans couldn't have hoped for anything better after firing Todd Helton Riley has made it to the college football playoff 4 times at Oklahoma, and has been recruiting at a higher level for the Sooners. So if he can recruit that high and get people to go to Norman, Oklahoma, speculation is he should be able to do the same thing in sunny Southern California, in downtown Los Angeles, to get top student athletes to come play in this innovative offense in such an environment. The area expertise of Riley has been on the offensive side, specifically at quarterback, where his last quarterbacks have all been Heisman Trophy winners, and have went on to go to the NFL, except Jalen Hurts, who did not win the Heisman Trophy for Lincoln Riley. USC has seen some of the top quarterbacks leave the state of California, and with his presence, hopefully they should be able to stay. So right now you have Bryce Young, who was originally committed to USC and went to Alabama. JT Daniels signed with USC and was injured under the Helton era, then transferred to Georgia. And there's a big debate going right now on who's going to start the playoff game. Is it going to be JT Daniels or the little guy that started for the SEC championship? I can't remember his name right now. Then you got Matt Corral, who left California and is a starting quarterback at Ole Miss. So you have a lot of SEC quarterbacks from the state of California playing outside of the state of California. So just by building a fence and creating proverbial state of Southern California, or in a larger sense, the state of California, then he should be able to compete immediately for championships and make the BCS playoff. It hasn't just been at quarterback either. Some of the top recruits overall at many other positions have been leaving the state as well. Right here, there's a picture of Kayvon Thibodeau, who is projected to be the number 1 recruit. Well, he was the number 1 recruit that signed with Oregon in 2019. He's projected to be the number 1 pick in this year's NFL draft. He's a stud at defensive end, and he left the state of California and went to not sunny, but cold Oregon. So again, by getting a high-profile coach that's going to heighten the brand equity and get it back to where it once was at USC, along with bringing an innovative offense in, a lot of people feel like California and USC will be just fine because they'll keep those players home. Riley stated that he'll be able to help with that problem immediately, and that's one of the main reasons he came there, to make it a premier destination again. Now you have ESPN 300 running back Raleek Brown. He's the second best recruit in California in the 2022 class. So of all the players in the 2022 class from the state of California, he is ranked number 2. He was originally committed to the University of Oklahoma, but told ESPN that Riley going to USC changes everything, and flipped his commitment to USC, and along with some other Sooners, will now be singing Fight On. So now let's look at Raleek Brown's highlights. Again, this is the second best player in the state of California, a former Oklahoma commit who is now flipped to USC and is expected to sign with them during the early signing period next week.
Touchdown is going to be run by number 4, Raleek Brown.
You know what it is, 4-3 mode, ain't nothing. Light work, running through these boys.
Let's go.
You already know what it is. Get money, get money.
Under the radar sports media, the hottest sports videos in the nation.
Turn up, man!
All right, so that right there was Relique Brown. Thank you, sports media, for providing that video. Again, a lot of people are calling Mr. Brown the next Reggie Bush. He was the ability to catch the ball and his explosiveness, his shiftiness out the backfield, as well as ability to cut at full speed. Lincoln Riley is loading up with a lot of in-state prospects, and particularly from the Los Angeles area, trying to create a super team in which he hopes to compete immediately. So we will see in this next exciting football year. Before we close out, I also want to give news. Shout out to Grambling State University. Breaking news is they're expected to announce the hiring of Hugh Jackson, former Cincinnati Bengals head coach, Hugh Jackson and Cleveland Browns coach as the next head coach at Grambling State University. So in closing, I would like to leave you guys with these few things. How can these hires promote the student athletes versus the coach and the institution? Meaning, how do these big time coaching hires, when you put in $100 million and then the people that make the money have to go get a cold sandwich? You know, how do the student athletes get promoted in all areas of their life while their sweat equity is making this $20 billion a year? Similar to collegiate basketball, will college athletes be able to gain more control over their time and bodies? Meaning, will they be able to get more time to do things that they need? Football is so intensive where when you do have some free time, you're most likely studying film, trying to get a competitive edge or in some type of rehab. So that off season is critical. So what type of time elements are going to be invested into these players to get them some spiritual and physical healing before a grueling season approaches them in a few months? And our last question upon on our final thoughts are, will the NCAA allow player unions and pay taking away from the institutions and the NCAA to promote fair work? So just as many student athletes are saying now with this NIL deal, let's take it a step further. The NCAA isn't doing anything yet. They're not giving a portion of the billions that we make. They're just giving us the opportunity to gain employment from outside companies. So they're still keeping all our money. So hopefully as this progresses in the next 10 years or so, you may see the dissolvement of the NCAA, or you may see student athletes as actual paid workers. Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of Sports 101. I am your host, Jamar Harp. Be sure to follow me on social media at Twitter at Coach_Harp412, and Facebook under Jamar Harp. Please make sure you get social with Sports 101 and a variety of other shows on SportsZone Chicago by following SportsZone Chicago on social media. SportsZone Chicago will be found on Twitter at SportsZone CHI, Facebook at SportsZone Chicago, and Instagram at SportsZone Chicago. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, search SportsZone Chicago, but more importantly, we need everyone to download the SportsZone Chicago app. The SportsZone Chicago app can be found on the iTunes, Google Play, and Amazon stores. Again, thank you for tuning in to another weekly episode of Sports 101. I am your host, Jamar Harp, and we'll see you next week at our normally scheduled time, Wednesday, 8 p.m. Central, 9 p.m. Eastern. And I'm gone. All right.